Even Fats Waller, because Fats played basic music.
Louis Jordan, along with Elvis Presley and even Fats Waller, since his style was so straightforward in its feel. Chuck Berry is widely credited with shaping rock and roll into what we know. He blended blues roots with a hint of country flavor and ended up crafting a sound no one had experienced before.
Come on, Johnny.
Yet even the man known as the father of rock and roll looked up to others. Here come the 5 bands Chuck Berry once said he could watch endlessly. Let's start counting them down. Number 5, Louis Jordan and his Timpani 5. Chuck Berry always remembered the roots of his sound. He spoke freely about those who inspired him, which many artists of his time chose not to do. Whenever people wondered about his guitar style, he would immediately list the names that shaped it. Near the very top of that list was always Louis Jordan. Chuck Berry once mentioned that Jordan was the earliest musician he heard playing what sounded like rock and roll, which is striking coming from someone credited with creating the genre. Through the 1940s, Louis Jordan led his Timpani 5 and dominated jukeboxes across America. He had the ability to sing, to perform, to make audiences laugh, and then move them emotionally. The group played with precision, energy, and a rhythm perfect for dancing crowds. Louis Jordan seemed to understand what audiences wanted before they realized it themselves. Songs like Caledonia, Choo Choo Chiboogie, and Let the Good Times Roll became hits, delivered with unmatched charm and confidence. Chuck Berry paid close attention to all of it. The link between Jordan's music and Berry's later hits goes beyond simple influence. It is deeply rooted, almost like musical DNA. I believe these influences define the spirit of the music because sound is universal. You really cannot change it. Back in 1946, Jordan's guitarist, Carl Hogan, played a signature opening riff on Ain't That Just Like a Woman. Chuck Berry heard that riff at some point, kept it in mind, and by 1958 turned it into the backbone of Johnny B. Goode. He openly admitted this himself. He explained that he likely caught the tune on a jukebox in the late 1940s, noticed the riff, and remembered it. Most musicians might have kept that detail hidden, but Chuck Berry chose to acknowledge it publicly. Louis Jordan also proved that a smaller band could deliver more excitement than a large orchestra. You didn't need 20 players, just 5 skilled musicians and a frontman who could command the room. He also showed that a black artist could cross racial boundaries while staying true to himself, performing for both black and white audiences on his own terms. That idea deeply influenced Chuck Berry and shaped his ambitions. He wanted to win over the entire audience, not just a portion of it. Berry also studied Jordan's stage presence, the smoothness, the control, and the celebratory feel of every performance. He absorbed all those lessons and carried them to the very top of the charts. Louis Jordan and his Timpani 5 take the number 5 spot. Next up at number 4, Muddy Waters and his band. Some artists you admire from afar, while others completely change your path in life. For Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters was the latter. Since his teenage years, Chuck Berry had been playing blues and listening to Waters' records long before meeting him. When he finally saw Muddy Waters perform live in a Chicago club in 1955, he arrived late and only caught the final song. But that was all it took. As soon as the performance ended, Chuck Berry approached the stage. What followed became one of the defining moments in rock history. He told Muddy Waters that he played guitar and directly asked how to reach a record label.
That one of the greatest men, as I've just sung about him, standing right before me.
Without hesitation, Muddy Waters gave him a name and address. Go find Leonard Chess at Chess Records on 47th and Cottage. Chuck Berry later described that meeting in his autobiography as feeling like speaking to someone of immense importance, like a president or even the Pope. That was exactly how it felt to a young man from St. Louis meeting his hero face to face. The following Monday, Chuck Berry went to Chess Records. Leonard Chess signed him, and within weeks, Maybelline was on the way to becoming a million-selling record. None of that would have happened without Muddy Waters pointing him in the right direction. Chuck Berry fully recognized this and never denied it. Muddy Waters and his band demonstrated the power of the electric guitar when played with authority and emotion. That raw Chicago blues sound became the foundation Chuck Berry built upon. Muddy Waters had taken Delta blues, amplified it, and shook the world. Chuck Berry heard that energy and instantly understood its potential. The music Chuck Berry later created was different from Waters' style. He mixed in country elements, teenage storytelling, humor, and showmanship. But at its core, beneath the riffs and duck walks, it all traced back to the blues Muddy Waters electrified in Chicago. Chuck Berry once admitted that he borrowed as much as possible from Muddy Waters. For someone credited with inventing a genre, that's an unusually honest admission. Muddy Waters and his band take the number 4 spot. At number 3, the Rolling Stones. Imagine a train platform in Dartford, England in 1962. A young Keith Richards notices a teenager holding a Chuck Berry record. That brief moment sparks a conversation. From that conversation, a band is formed. That group would become the Rolling Stones. The entire legacy of one of rock's greatest bands can be traced back to a Chuck Berry album tucked under the arm of Mick Jagger on a chilly English morning. Chuck Berry always appreciated that story and found it fascinating. He mentioned it on different occasions. The Stones always made their roots clear without hiding them. Their debut single in 1963 turned out to be a cover of Berry's Come On. There was no disguise, no reinvention, and no attempt to claim ownership of the sound. They were making it clear to everyone who they admired and challenging anyone who disagreed. Berry truly valued that kind of sincerity. He had gone through years of seeing others use his music without acknowledgement. The Stones expressed their gratitude every time they played, and continued doing so for 6 decades. Keith Richards ended up living in Berry's home in 1986 while preparing the concert film Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll for Berry's 60th birthday. He described the experience as a lifelong dream fulfilled. During practice sessions, Berry interrupted him mid-song, highlighted a flaw in the opening riff of Carol, and delivered 4 unforgettable words: "You want it right." Richards went back and relearned the proper fingering from the beginning. It was the teacher and the learner together again, decades after the original recordings. Berry once spent hours with Richards discussing country songwriters, Hank Williams, and how multiple musical styles could blend into one piece. Richards later said those talks influenced his approach to songwriting forever. What Berry passed on to the Rolling Stones went beyond riffs. It was an entire philosophy of what a rock and roll band should represent. Richards continued to acknowledge it openly until the very end. Chuck Berry, he said, is the granddaddy of us all. Every guitarist who came after carried something from those early records, and Richards recognized it more than most. 2. Elvis and the Blue Noon Boys. If you asked Berry to sum up Elvis in a single line, he would respond with one of the biggest smiles in rock and roll history. "I think he had a wonderful manager," he once told a St. Louis journalist in 2008 before laughing. Yet the humor only went so far. When Berry became serious, what he said next carried full weight. He stated that Elvis was the greatest there ever was, is, or will be. There were no caveats, no hesitation, just a clear and complete declaration. Beneath that statement, however, sat a deeper and more complicated reality. Berry had every reason to feel resentment about his experiences in the 1950s. He had written the songs, shaped the guitar style, and built the blueprint. Then Elvis appeared with the right image, the right management, and the right circumstances, and suddenly the spotlight shifted elsewhere. Berry understood the business side of it without denial. Blacks didn't have the airwaves Elvis had, he explained, adding that Elvis delivered what he had beautifully. That single statement reveals something profound about America in 1955. Berry expressed it calmly, which made it even more powerful. What he truly heard in Elvis's voice was something that rose above all of that. He believed Presley sang better than Bing Crosby. That was not a casual remark. Berry felt that true singing required swing and a certain vibration, and Elvis possessed that rare quality. He could feel it deeply every time he listened to him. That level of respect does not come from kindness alone. It comes from a musician listening with precision. Berry's trained ears recognized the truth in Elvis's talent, regardless of everything else. Tom Jones once told a story about taking Elvis to watch Berry perform live. Midway through the show, Elvis leaned over and said, "That's the real king of rock and roll on that stage." Two legends stood in the same space, each acknowledging the other. That shared respect between two men who could easily have felt bitterness spoke louder than any interview. Coming in at number 1, the Beatles. Something unexpected unfolded in 1963. Chuck Berry was in prison, serving time and watching his career fade away. The hits had slowed, the radio had moved on, and it seemed like the world was ready to forget him. Then 4 young musicians from Liverpool stepped onto the stage, playing his riffs and singing his words, and everything shifted. By the time Berry was released that same year, the Beatles had already spread his music across the globe. Berry spoke about it with striking honesty. "The Beatles did a lot of Chuck Berry," he said. "The Rolling Stones did some of my stuff. That's what it took to wake up the people in my own country." He was describing something both painful and remarkable at once. America had overlooked what he created and even imprisoned him while it happened. Then a British band brought it back to life at full volume. Because of that, Berry felt genuine warmth towards the Beatles. It wasn't just appreciation, it was something deeper. John Lennon clearly understood Berry's impact in a way few others expressed so directly. If you tried to give rock and roll another name, you might call it Chuck Berry. That was not said lightly. It was a precise recognition of musical truth. The Beatles performed at least 15 of Berry's songs during their career, including Roll Over Beethoven and Rock and Roll Music. They never tried to hide it. Each performance reminded audiences where it all began. In 1972, Lennon invited Berry to appear on the Mike Douglas Show, where they performed Memphis, Tennessee, and Johnny B. Goode together live. When Berry entered the studio, Lennon later recalled that the words came out instantly, "Chuck Berry, my hero." It was spontaneous and sincere. Berry never forgot that moment. The creator of rock and roll and one of its greatest ambassadors finally shared the same stage. Chuck Berry laid the foundation for rock and roll from the ground up. Even so, he had his own inspirations. These 5 bands helped shape the man who would go on to influence everything. If you want to trace the roots of modern music, this is where to begin. Subscribe for more countdowns like this, and drop a comment sharing the Chuck Berry song you never get tired of.